And
No!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another show of TNO, the finale recap of Winners at War. Sorry, I try to be like Jeff Probst there. We've got two great guests today. We've got Aviator, aka Avi, from Chicago. It's from Chicago, right, Avi?
Yep. It's okay.
Yep. And the other one, who I know as Coach, because he's also a strategic mastermind, Scotty Hansen. Scott, what's up?
Hi, doing good.
Yeah. So we're excited to have these two guys. Why? Because I played with them in Costa Rica org, and they know their stuff. They went quite far in the game. I think we were the final five, final six. What was it?
6.
Oh, I got Final Five, yeah. So,
Yeah, final six. That was close enough. All right, Corbus, you want to just show them the ropes?
Yes, Avi, Scott, first of all, I just want to say, usually we do this at my place. A whole bunch of Survivor fans. You know, there's heavy energy in the air, and me and Claudio, we are live. But for obvious reasons, tonight we are shooting it over Zoom. Any case, but welcome.
Just like Jeff Probst did in our garage. So we all.
Okay, so you picked that up. Okay, I'm glad. Any case, so welcome on our show. Thanks so much for joining us. First things first, we are gonna discuss on who deserves the Golden Spear. I know it's basically hard to award it to anyone else than the winner, but obviously a couple of people made a couple of good moves, and we want to commend them in the Golden Spear section and at least give them a nomination for what they did well and did right. And so I think, from my side, I have to give a massive shout out to Michelle and Natalie, Claudio, for, playing from the bottom and making it count, doing the best with what they could with their given circumstances. And at the end of the day, I mean, they broke up the alliance. Granted, they didn't get rid of Tony, but they did quite a bit of damage, Claudio. So I think I want to at least nominate the Natalie and Michelle duo for a Golden Spear. Claudio, what do you think?
So what is that? Two people in one? Is that what you're saying? Two people for the same award.
I'm gonna have to go for a combo. Yes.
All right, so the combo meal on Corbus. I'm going to let Scott run away and see what his thoughts are. Scotty, what do you think about the combo duo there?
I think, if you're going to nominate one, you have to nominate the other because they kind of did everything there together once Natalie came back in. They shared all their information with each other with Natalie's advantages. They relied on each other to be getting these immunity wins because they were obviously the two biggest immunity threats in the game, I would say at that point. They're probably two of the best immunity players, honestly, on the whole season. Michelle's one of the best challenge competitors of all time, I think, and Natalie, same to her. Obviously, we saw her on the edge grinding it out, and then on her original season, she had great immunity performances. So I thought it was just fun watching two great competitors come back in and put up those awesome immunity showings.
Yeah, and battle it out in that particularly. I think it's a particularly tough, concentration-oriented immunity challenge with the balls spinning. That's something I would love to try out myself as well. But I think it's much harder than it actually looks on TV. But it was cool to see them, go all out, and they both had 5 balls and it was all spinning and so on. And Claudia also, I had to mention this situation with Natalie and Michelle. We spoke about it in our last episode. We said, okay, so Natalie is going to come back and share a bunch of information with regards to what's going on the edge. And if she's smart, she'll use it to her advantage. I think she did. And you could see when she said, so everyone is saying, the votes are going to go to Tony at this stage. You could literally see Tony's face drop. I mean, I was reminded of how a beat drops in a 2018 CrossFit class when I saw Tony's face. That was the
You're gonna have to give us some tips there because I've never been to a CrossFit class. I don't know about you guys. You guys do any of that stuff there? Then
No.
Don't worry, Scott.
you're gonna have to give everyone a tutorial.
It's overrated. It's overrated. Don't worry about it.
But going back to Natalie's, I think she does really well with regards to using the edge to her advantage in terms of, like the other guys, or like Ben said, rather, there's no fact checking when you come back or when you come from the edge of extinction. You can't ask so and so, is she lying? Is it true? So she does play that up well, and she puts Tony on the spot. To Tony's credit, though, he manages it really, really well, and he goes to his core alliance, and he manages to steer the ship in the right direction, regardless of the what he said. He said desperation, right? Avi, I'm right. He said desperation. There's two things. Desperation, you can find cracks or you can create the cracks. And obviously, Natalie was trying to create the cracks, and he was just mending them up with some cement. So he was doing really well. But Avi, what are your nominations going into all of this?
I mean, listen, like you're talking about the Golden Spear, like, Cobus is right. Like Michelle and Natalie played, great games. Like I really thought they did well. But like you said, like, the answer, like there's an obvious answer here. And it's obviously Danny because of that, speech there and runaway at this point. No, I completely agree. Michelle, I was just so upset that she didn't get a single vote. I mean, especially, was I the only one who thought when Nick, when like Nick was doing his confessional, he's like, you were on the bottom the whole time. I'm like, okay, he's definitely voting for Michelle.
Yeah.
Then he votes for Tony, who, what's going on? I don't know. Whatever. But I thought Michelle, I mean, you have like a completely tight final three in Tony, Ben, and Sarah. It's like a locked in final three. And somehow she penetrates that, which I'm still not completely sure how she did it. I mean, she got some key immunity wins. She managed to, get Ben out. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with, that very intense moment that I'm sure we're going to talk about where Ben gave Sarah permission. But
the Ben bomb, he brought it back.
No, I mean, they like all the final three. Like I think this is the first time like they all played like fantastic games. Like Natalie just doing everything she could to survive on the edge and grinding to get those fire tokens and advantages and just she's just an absolute beast. Like so.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. And I suppose I was going to save this for later, seeing as we're not really going to do a Storms of Brewing, but rather an overarching like discussion of the theme of the season. But when you do have those three players, I think I'm sitting back in my couch and I'm going, oh, by the way, guys, this is a fun fact. I got this buff sent to us from Leroux Burt, the South African producer, while I was watching the final episode. Chris also got his.
Shout out to Leroux.
Anyway, yeah, thanks, Lurie, for that. But like you said, Avi, I mean, we've got three really great competitors in the final three seats, and I'm thinking, and they're each very different. They each have their own narrative, and like Michelle always says, you make it to the end with regards to the story that you're able to, or the narrative you're able to build for yourself. And she built a fantastic narrative, and I was scratching my head. How did she not get one vote? And when I was reading one of the things that she mentioned, or one of the articles, I think it was Mike Bloom's article, she said it was Nick, Adam, Wendell, and Danny were the likely candidates to vote for her. And that's who she thought she was going to be getting votes from. But there's something that happened with regards to Tyson being an advocate for Natalie and obviously Rob the other way for Tony. And that's funny how when you look at that, those sort of things holistically play a huge impact or play a huge role in the juror casting the vote. I don't know, Scott, what do you think about that in terms of having a loud voice or a pioneer advocating all the jurors to vote in a certain direction?
I think it depends how it's done. So, like, if you're trying to make jurors feel like they're stupid for not voting someone, then they're not going to vote for that person. I think I remember reading at one point, Tony almost lost some votes in Cagayan because of Spencer's speech. It didn't make people want to vote for him. It made people want to vote against him because they're like, why is Spencer talking down to me? It's this 23-year-old guy and he's telling me I don't know how to vote. But if you have someone like Rob who's on edge of extinction, just kind of like talking up Tony, but like just chatting about his game and saying how he's playing really well, then I think that would be an amazing way to rally jury votes.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think Kenny mentioned that in the previous episode where he said, that could end up being the case where the winner is due or comes down to the fact of one of the jurors, rallying the troops. But also let's dive down into, we've got the three tribal, we had tribal council, the three candidates are there, three finalists are there, and they each present great arguments. But out of the arguments in themselves, who do you guys think, or Avi, in your opinion, who do you think presented the best argument when you're looking holistically at the situation, just at tribal council, apart from the whole game?
That's a really good question. I think, Scott, you were talking about this. I think you mentioned this yesterday. Like they kind of subdued Tony's edit in the finale, which I definitely noticed that as well. They kind of, tried to prop up, Sarah and Natalie and Michelle a little bit to kind of like throw you off the scent. But I mean, Michelle and Natalie, I think they had great final tribals, especially Michelle. I really thought, like she was really, I said, I was watching with my parents. I said, that's exactly what she needs to do. She was saying, I was on the bottom. I was left out of these votes and I still got here. And that was exactly the case she needed to make. But in my opinion, it has to be Tony. I mean, he just dominated the game. I mean, there's no other way to say he had a complete iron grip on the game from basically the beginning of the merge and never let up. Kim was like basically the only threat to his power. And as soon as he got rid of her, like that was it. I'm still in awe how he didn't receive a single vote the entire game. How does that happen? He's Tony. He didn't get a single vote. What?
Yeah. And I think, but that's the irony, right? Is you've got him who didn't, Tony not getting a vote. And that's arguably why he probably won the season in itself. Just that argument, case in point, give me the $1 million or $2 million because of not receiving a vote. But then you've also got Michelle, in a sense, who went to 15 out of 19 tribal councils and again survived every single one. So it's that subjective metric that these guys hold up against the guys that are in the finalists and decide who they want to give their vote to. Almost like in our season where we had a Ben versus a Kenny scenario. I mean, the vote was a 5-4 and it went down to one vote, but there was one player who pretty much dictated the game. Am I right, Scott?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah,
I
and
think
it still came. Yeah, sorry, close.
Claudio, just back to your point with regards to the final three and their motivations and speeches. I think any of those speeches is worthy of a win in any other season, but specifically in this season, we've said it 1,000 times before. I mean, and Avi has said it now again. It had to be Tony. I mean, Tony, he did everything right. Also, there are a couple of big names who threw their weight behind Tony as well. Not necessarily on the edge of extinction, like we said. Boston Rob being an advocate for Tony, but externally, Russell Hans and Richard from season one, they both recognized Tony's game as superb. So although Michelle and Natalie played phenomenal games, they made amazing comebacks. It's just too hard to beat. So a bit of bias came in from the edge of extinction, and it went Tony's way at the end of the day. What I want to say about Tony is, I don't know, I mean, when I was in high school, whenever I asked my parents, Claudio, can I have a motorcycle for my 16th birthday? They would say, do you think money grows on my back? I just want to say, Tony won't ever be able to say that to his kids,
No, his money comes from the trees where he's got his Tony view there.
Exactly. That excuse is gone for him, His kids basically ask him anything that they want now.
Okay, but then let's reeling it back into the Golden Spear and particular moves. Out of that whole episode, which player made the best move? And if we got to single down to one move, Scott, take me away. Let me hear your thoughts, sir.
So this might be unconventional, and you might not agree with this, but I honestly think, and it might not be a great survivor move, but I think Ben made the best move for himself when
Oh,
he
good call.
gave Sarah permission to vote him out. Because if you've read some of his postseason interviews and stuff like that, he needed that for his mental health to be able to come back into the real world and trust people again. He was saying to, I think it was in an interview with Dalton Ross, where he was saying how he really needed that peace of mind that he could trust people again, and that he would be able to go back into his home life and feel like the person that he was on the island was reflective of who he thought he was in real life. And he didn't want to go to Final Tribal Council and just be grilled and then be waiting 10 months to find out, like, maybe they grilled me, but maybe they give me the 2 million. And he decided that little extra money for third place wasn't worth losing the peace of mind that he had by keeping those relationships that he built.
Scott, I hear what you say, but that reminded me of when a girl wanted to friend zone me back in the day, and I preempted the situation by telling her, what do you think about being friends?
Yeah, Corvus, you being friend zoned. Yeah, okay. Actually, I believe that story. But nicely played, Corvus. Well done. Yeah, but the Ben bomb is it's a great one. It's like you said, Scotty. He weighs up the pros and he weighs up the cons there, and he actually reveals some interesting information, saying as soon as Natalie comes back into the game, he's fully aware of what the jury's opinion is of him through her, as they had one-on-one. It wasn't shown on the edit. But at the same time, he's also very aware throughout the season through the disadvantages and the lack of tokens he received. So he knows he's got zero chance. And also, he knows for a fact he gets taken to the end, he's going to be seen as the GOAT. It's like Tony calls me, I don't think he says it correctly, but like he calls Michelle. So he just, and it was also a nice full circle from a story arc perspective. It was brilliant. I think he leaves the game. We all respect him for the decision to a point. No one is holding grudges. He's made it to the end. He's played a terrible game. He comes away, like you said, from a mental health perspective, clean, as well as from a game perspective, respected. Avi, what do you think about the Ben bomb?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just such a powerful moment. I mean, watching that, like, probably, up there with the top 5 emotional scenes in Survivor history. And just, a lot of the times, they like to go to, like, and they still did it a little bit with this one, which kind of annoyed me, but, like, everything's a blind side. Like, everything has to be like, everything's all about the surprise. And, like, they're building, which way is this person going to go? But, like, that's something I really appreciate, is those real moments where it's just like, a very human, real, authentic moment. And he's just like, I think you should vote me out to benefit your game. And yeah, that really, yeah.
Avi, I must say on that point, also a very real moment was when Tony just beat Sarah in the fire making challenge as well. I mean, and he was like crying and holding her and saying, "I'm sorry." I picked a little.
You cried.
You
cried. Did you have your tissues?
I
believe that too.
I'm gonna admit there was a tear. Any case,
I mean that whole scene though, Kobus, that was very cinematic. It was great because it felt cinematic, but it didn't feel like it was forced.
Yes.
And the best part was it was reality TV. That was the great part. And also, like, if we're going to be scrutinizing players, Michelle, for example, we had arguments with regards to why she could have been at least gotten a vote. But for me, I feel like she needed that fire challenge and she needed that immunity that Natalie won at the same time. Whereas you could argue then Natalie, she feels comfortable in herself. And let's go back to Tony, Rob, Mr. Rob himself. I mean, he's got very high criteria, and if he lays out the plan and you don't follow his plan one bit, he's going to mark it off as not correct. Like, I feel like his kids need to get 100% for all their tests, because if they get 99%, it's not going to be good enough. But going back to his argument with regards to Natalie needing to take Ben to the fire challenge and actually beating him is an interesting perspective, because if we're looking at the season as a whole and we say, okay, this is edge of extinction, or it's part of the game where we have fire tokens introduced, but we've also got edge of extinction. Natalie completely dominates it, just like Chris Underwood did, right? The problem is when you're playing from that sort of side of the game, you have all the advantages. You have the perspective and the knowledge in order to influence the game. She's obviously had more power because of the advantages that she collected, and she owned Edge completely. But that then puts more pressure when you come back into the game, because then the expectation of you to dominate, like Rob said, has to be flawless. And that was one perspective where you say, well, in the end, it cost her votes, but probably wouldn't have helped anyway. But hypothetically, she would have had more of a chance.
Well, do you guys think that's true, or was that just like, like you just wanted to say at voting convention? Do you think that's actually true that if she takes on, I mean, obviously, if she takes him on in fire, then he's not there. So that would help her. It would be her, Sarah, and Michelle, right? That would be if she beats him. But yeah, I mean, I still think, I don't know. Do you think Rob votes for her over Sarah in that scenario?
Yeah, I think so.
He
I
might.
think if she takes out Tony, she probably wins the game. If you're considering now, like she was the one who received votes, Michelle received nothing. Sarah's whole thing, I think the thing that left Sarah within the game was the fact that the jury wasn't sure if Tony was calling all the shots or if it was Sarah behind a lot of those decisions. So if she completely eliminates that equation, yeah, I think she got a huge shot at taking it.
And also, Claudio, just on that point as well. I mean, if Tony was gotten rid of, I think he would have added his voice and his influence to the edges or to the jury and supported them, or actually made a case for Sarah to vote for her for the ultimate winner.
Let's remove Tony out of the equation and let's bring in Michelle beating Tony at fire making challenge. Then what happens? And then you got Sarah, you've got Michelle, and then you've got Natalie, but you've got Michelle who's got the Rocky Balboa edit going for her, ultimate underdog, and then she takes out the Russian, Russian. What's the word I'm looking for, guys? Help me out, here, Scott. The Russian bad guy. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
No, Scott, what happens then? Michelle takes Tony out, fire making challenge. She's then got 3 immunities plus the fire making challenge. She survived every vote. She's got the social game, apart from the fact that, like you said, she had good one-on-one alliances, but she didn't dominate the game holistically. And I feel like that's a part of the game that they take, or winners. When you're looking at a winner's edit or winner's game, people are giving Tony this game because he's controlled it, right? He's a chaos in a form of control who's added and adapted. They all rated him as the winner because he adapted. Michelle, did she really adapt? She played the same game. She's only played twice. Second time with winners, and she made it to the end twice, playing the same game. So which one's actually more credible? Scott?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, obviously Tony won, so maybe adapting your game and changing it up is better. But Michelle, again, like you said, she made it to the end doing the same game. But if I'm going to play a game of Survivor, I don't necessarily want to play Michelle's game because that means you're on the bottom for most of the time and you're outside of a lot of the votes. And maybe you can win, but that's tough to keep your sanity when you're outside of almost every vote and you're just not able to know what's going on. Like, I wouldn't want to play Michelle's game, to be honest.
I think that it's a very risky strategy to have, to be constantly on the outs and to only have, very limited relationships. And although they might be, very strong relationships, but if you're only going to have, a couple of one-on-ones, you won't be in the eye of the storm. You're always basically on the edge of the storm, and that's where the
edge of extinction, bro.
but on the edge of the storm, that's where you don't want to be. You want to be in the eye where it's quiet. On the edge you might take a couple of hits. Any case, that's my take on Michelle.
Something that needs to be mentioned as well, and Avi, I'm going to throw this straight at you, is from a Golden Sphere perspective and deciding to say, like, what was a good move? We know that Sarah comes into it and she mentions, and this is also an interesting debate with regards to whether or not it's controversial, but a great talking point nonetheless, is you've got the gender bias. She comes in to the tribal council and she mentions the gender bias. And Jeff Probst, like, he takes accountability largely, from my opinion. I think he takes accountability because of how season 39 was handled. So he's trying to say, oh, okay, this is my fault. I do it too, et cetera, et cetera. But apart from it being factual to a point, I feel like it's a great move in terms of her turning the jury and her also like kind of telling everyone, listen, I'm playing the same game Tony is. Everyone's giving Tony the credit because he's a man. she's used that as an example, and all of a sudden you see Adam talking to Sophie and going, yeah, I like that point. That's a great point. And then it comes back to Yule in the end going, who's really calling the shots? Is it Sarah or is it Tony? So what did you guys, Avi, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point by Sarah. I mean, when I first heard it, I'll be honest, when I first heard it last night, I was like, I don't know, is there really a bias? But the more I was thinking about it last night, I realized like, yeah, that's an extremely valid point. I mean, I think there's definitely an expectation that that women in Survivor are not supposed to be as deceitful. We see that with like Chaos Cass, who's considered like one of the biggest villains, and you have like Tony, who's like super likable, and like they both played pretty chaotic games. So yeah, I feel like she made the argument she needed to make, and I hopefully like going forward, people can be more recognizing of that bias, and we can finally get a female winner after 6 seasons, which is crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually thought this was the one opportunity where we were going to have an all 3 female finalists scenario, but it didn't quite pan out. And I suppose we now have a King of Survivor as a result.
That's your call with the all female final was very close though, Claudio.
And so was my prediction with Wendell coming back though. He was close.
But yes, we are. Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of things which we were spot on with, but let's admit, or seeing as gender bias is getting admitted, I think we need some females, Claudio, on our show. But also,
yeah, actually, that's about a point. Do you guys know any ladies who are keen to jump on it?
Yeah, I mean, Claudio,
that's fine.
What did you say?
Riley, your number 1 ally, isn't that?
Hey guys, I asked her straight after this thing, and she's like, "Nah, she first wants to see how everything goes with you guys." Because I said, "Listen, I've got a list. It's Kenny, it's Ben, it's Avi, it's Scott." And I said, "You're on top of my list." She's like, "No, let me see you go through the list first, and then I'll chat to you." Actually, she hasn't spoken to me since, so I think I scared her away.
In the TNO hosts' defense, we can say that we have invited Aurora and Michelle onto the show, and it seems that they've declined. So
Quibus is really good at telling people how we get rejected, and himself apparently. I don't know, dude. You don't tell people that. What's wrong with you?
I'm just putting it out there. The gender bias it's not as entrenched in the TNO as it's being perceived. Any case,
but perception is reality. Michelle does mention that. I think she's giving us a horrible perception. Yeah, Michelle. Anyway, yeah, okay, guys. From a Golden Spear perspective, we're each going to call a name. We're not going to give 2. Not going to give 2. We're going to call a name, and on 3, we're each going to say it. We're going to see if we all have the same name. All right. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Tony.
All right, cool. It seems like we got ours. So 3 of you guys said Tony.
No, I heard 2 other names.
What did you say? I heard Tony.
I said Tony.
I said
Tony was Avi.
Tony,
you
okay.
said.
Sorry, I didn't hear right. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, then who did you say, Quibus?
I said Tony.
Yeah, so 3 Tonys. Okay, you guys ready?
What
you know how to award this thing. I said Natalie, only because a whole game pretty much was this last episode. But I see where you guys are coming from. I mean, okay. And again, we were trying to be like gender neutral, add diversity to this whole thing. But okay, whatever. You guys ready? So you know how to throw I'm going to throw the golden spear. You guys all going to throw it. Okay. You guys ready? 3, 2, 1, there you go. And you're going to throw it like that. There you go, of course. Come on, Navi, dude. That's not how you throw something. Come on, dude.
That better? What do you have to do?
A lot better.
Yeah,
okay, Scott, you can. Okay. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
You can call it. You throw it, and then Scott's gonna call it. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Wait, what do I?
Throw it.
Yeah, bro, you got a spear.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, yeah. It's your spear.
There we go. All right, no, but you meant to call it now. So Tony.
Tony, you win the golden spear.
Congratulations, Tony. Well done. Scotty, that was well done. Dude, you're a pro. I can see this. Avi, we got to work on your throwing skills.
Okay.
Moving on, yeah.
So, wooden spoon. This is the part where we decide where we award the wooden spoon to the person who made the dumbest move. We call him the village idiot or the island idiot. Any case, nonetheless, it's always going to be hard. I mean, we've said it on a couple of occasions that in a season like this, I mean, you've got a bunch of winners. So it basically boils down to who got the worst edit. Let's say that. Let's use the euphemism of who got the short end of the edit in this episode. Claudio, what would you say?
I think for this particular episode, I think Avi not lighting his torch is a big downer.
Definitely. That's a very valid nomination.
Yeah, so Avi's name's out there. I don't know. What do you think? What's your counter argument there, Avi? Who do you want to nominate?
Go to Scott. I'm still thinking.
Okay, Scotty.
See, this episode's tough because I think everyone made good moves and bad moves, but I think the worst move in terms of gameplay was probably going along with my Golden Spear nomination for Ben. Sarah voting out Ben would be a wooden spoon nomination because that took away an easy path to the end for her, because if it's a final four of Sarah, Natalie, Ben, and Tony, and Natalie, we assume, wins that immunity again, then there's no way that Natalie doesn't have Ben make fire against Tony, because Ben is going to win that fire-making challenge 9 times out of 10. And I think in that case, you probably see Sarah winning the game, because Natalie doesn't go and take out Tony herself, even though Tony was taken out. Natalie isn't the one to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So she doesn't win those votes that needed her to play that perfect game coming back in. You have Tony on the jury campaigning for Sarah, and I think you end up seeing Sarah win the game in that situation.
Yeah, man, I completely. Sorry, Avi. Yeah.
No, when you talk about worst edit, there's really 2 names that come to mind. I think Sarah's one, and I think mainly because, we had that scene, that the perfect, Survivor editors just always continue to amaze, where it was like, where they were talking about, like, if Natalie had an idol, you know what I'm talking about? And they're like, Sarah knows best. Remember that? It was like, Sarah knows what's going on, and she clearly had no idea what was going on. So that was a great moment. But I also think, as much as it pains me to say this, because she's truly like my favorite player of all time, but Natalie, I just she really, like on the edge of extinction, she was amazing. But once she got back in the game, I think there were a lot of things she could have done wrong. She didn't do that she should have done, in terms of, not going after Sarah. At final 6, she should have taken out Sarah, or voting for Denise. I still don't know what that was. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, what? Like, what is happening? When Natalie and Michelle voted for Denise, that just boggled my mind. So I think, as much as it pains me to say, I think it was a rather weak episode for Natalie.
I think that's a valid move, because also, like, why are they targeting Denise? Like, when you've got Sarah sitting there who's completely vulnerable. That's crazy. So yeah, I completely agree with you. And also, I love the fact that, Scott, you started with Sarah, and started with Sarah with regards to, and Avi touching on that point where she's like, I'm in control. I know, there's no way she's got an idol. There's no ways. And then it's like, oh shit, she flushed 2, Ben and then Ben says, and Tony's like, yeah, I told you guys. I know this shit. I know what's going on. So I thought that was interesting. Who do you want to nominate there?
Claudia, I know people aren't necessarily going to agree with me. We've spoken about it in the Golden Spear section, but I think Ben exited the game by saying, vote me off. I don't think that wasn't the best move. I want to see someone try all the way. Give it their all. I know, I appreciate the sincerity, and I appreciate the fact that he maybe realized, he isn't gonna win. I hear all those arguments, but from a purely competitive side, I want to see a player give it his all the way to the end.
This disagreement is largely because he's a purist, and this is why he got along on really well with LaRue. So no judgment there. However, I do think Ben, like Scott mentioned, he did the right thing for himself and overall for his story within the game. So I'm not going to judge him for that. I do think, though, we can mention, even though I'm an advocate and I think she should have gotten at least 3 votes, I'm going to say Michelle's decision to just sit there tribal and not let Natalie send it to the fire-making challenge, that took her out of the running completely. I know we're dealing with high standards here. It is winners at war, but I think that was something that could have helped her game a little bit.
That's a valid point, Claudio. She could have pushed harder for Natalie to let her make fire against Tony.
Yeah, I mean, it was risky, but we saw in the fire-making stuff that she was the one getting to the fire quickest. The other 2 were panicked, even though she didn't necessarily know that, but she was really doing well. Avi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, do you think it's more about, like, the intention, like her making it clear to the jury that she wants to be in fire, or actually taking him on? Like, do you think, which is more important there?
Well, I think if you're going to stay to the jury, there's always a risk of you possibly actually being given the fire-making challenge. So intentionally going in with a mindset that that's going to be a possibility, but advocating it, saying, listen, I'm prepared to go against her. I think that would have sent Rob's eyes back into his skull going, damn, girl, you got some balls. You came at me like early on and now you're still going at it. So I think that would have earned her huge respect.
Even if she actually take him on, like just saying that.
Yeah. Saying that, I think that gives her 10 extra points with regards to our underdog story. I mean, Rocky Balboa would have definitely been like, yo, give me the biggest man. I want to take down the biggest man.
Well, and from what I've heard, Michelle was originally going to be making fire, and then Sarah went and convinced Natalie to have Sarah make fire against Tony. That's great for Sarah's game, because if she wins that, she probably wins the game. Honestly, we've had one winner who got taken to the end and one winner who won immunity and didn't make fire since the fire-making challenge, and the rest were the winners of the fire-making challenge. I think that's Ben, Chris, Wendell. Wendell made fire. And now Tony, all since the fire-making challenge, have made fire. And then you have, I think, Tommy, who was taken in the end, and Nick, who won immunity. So it's 4-1 at this point of making fire wins you the game.
Yeah, so exactly. It's a risk worth taking then. Like, there's no point not taking that risk. And, credit to Sarah. I didn't know she had done that, because for me, Natalie lays it out. She says, I can't send Sarah to battle Tony because it's going to give her, if she comes out of it, she's going to have something huge on her resume. And she lands up doing it anyway. That's why I was sure that Michelle was going to go there. Again, they deceived us then, probably why they left that out of the edit. But I mean, credit to Sarah for doing that, because had she taken that on, or had she come out there successful, the result would have probably been hers as well.
Yeah, and it was, I must say, it was at the end of the day, it was very, very close between Sarah and Tony with the fire. Yes, it was. I mean, I thought, Claudia, I know you're not a big fan of the fire making challenge, but if I ever had to do the fire making challenge, just from a strategic point of view, don't you think it would be better to you build a tiny fire with a husk, and then you stack sticks up pretty high and prop a piece of husk at the top, so that catches fire and that burns the little rope through, because Sarah, that almost happened for Sarah. She used so much husk that the flames from the husk almost burned through the rope.
Yeah, she went for the go big or go home approach.
Claudia,
I think you're right. It nearly paid off. It almost looked like that damage she did early on was going to be enough to take it for her. But I suppose when Tony builds the Babylon Tower, there's no stopping that.
Scott, Avi, can I just ask, how is your fire making skills? Have you?
I told you, Avi, this is coming. I told you this is coming.
Have you used flint yet? If you haven't, then I do not approve of you entering Survivor yet.
Yeah,
Haven't made
wouldn't
fire
do
with
it
Flint
with
yet.
me.
I've made fires before, but not with Flint.
I've
Cool.
used matches. I have done that.
Gee whiz, guy. The extreme.
I suppose that's
guy.
Travis. I think that's the next question. The next question would be, guys, are you guys are entering, right? You have to be entering.
In the next couple of years, I want to apply.
That's a long-term goal. You, Avi?
I could never do it. I told you I said there was one reason, and for me, it's just being filmed for 24 hours a day. That's too much exposure. I don't know. I would just be too uncomfortable for me. But
Don't worry, man. They don't film you when you're taking a dump.
I know. I don't know. It's like
You're
your
Bryce.
celebrity. Like everyone can like see you and people on Reddit like making posts. Like I don't know. I wouldn't want that.
I suppose
Okay.
that's a good segue. I know before we give our wooden spoon, but I suppose that's a good segue into what Jeff Probst is thinking with regards to opening up applications to 16-year-olds and them knowing, not necessarily understanding the full consequence of entering a show like Survivor. What are your opinions on that, guys?
Like there's got to be huge liability issues with that, having 16, 17-year-olds and taking them to a foreign country. Like I feel like you have really big liability issues there.
Yeah, and on top of season 39, you had that situation with Dan, inappropriate touching, and now you're taking somewhat minors to another country. Sorry, Chris.
Claudia, I guess the thought process behind that would be to basically cast those, although they would accept the application at this stage, they would only cast the person as soon as they become an adult, which is it an 18-year-old in the States? It used to be 21 here in South Africa, and then we changed it a couple of years ago to 18. And there has been some 19-year-olds.
Guys, Kovis is a lawyer. Just so you guys know, Kovis is a lawyer. He's flexing right now. Keep flexing.
Any case, so my take on it would be that they would cast them as soon as they turn 18. Any case, but Scott, just before you submit your application, I'm gonna send you a flint, and I want to see a video of you making fire with the flint.
All right. So wait, Kovis, you're saying they want 16-year-olds to apply so they can build up the hype, attract the new younger audience, and then try and prep them for the coming years. I feel like that's a huge long-term game that no one should really have to commit themselves to. It's like a terrible false dream.
No, Claudia, I think the thing is in the States, they're already busy with correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but are they not already busy with season 43 shooting that, or is that not going to be shot next?
Well, 41 and 42 haven't been shot yet, and it wouldn't surprise me if they have to recast for some of that because of everything getting pushed back. So like people cleared off. They're like, I think 41 was supposed to film like late March into April or April into May, and then season 42 would have filmed May into June. And so I think they may have to recast some of that if they're filming it in like July and August. You're gonna have people who took off for March that can't take off for July, and so they're definitely gonna have to fill some new spots.
Yeah, and that's the same situation here for our South African season. Larry mentioned it regarding saying like, yeah, some people aren't going to be available. And I think in the casting process, they gave them calls saying, reassuring people, listen, we still have you in mind. Just keep it open if it's possible, even though it's hard to make long-term commitment. So, Avi, does that mean 0% chance just because of the privacy issue? You're not even going to consider it, change your mind? What's going on there? Despite coming in 5th place, it's Survivor Costa Rica.
Or is different than reality. No, I would do. I think the most I would do is like a college. I went to University of Maryland, and they have. I don't know if you've heard Maryland Survivor. So I would do something like that, like a college thing. Like I feel like that could be fun, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I would be.
Yeah. That would be.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I just say like it would be cool, but the people that
that'd
get challenges, I would love to do that.
Yeah, the dream team's pretty cool. Because you're aware of what the dream team is. It's the students that they get together to actually test all the challenges before sending the actual castaways to go do them.
Yeah, man, that would be epic. Yes, maybe we've got a.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's just tell them we're 20 and then maybe they'll take us. But yeah, I mean,
Claudio, we can pass for 20-year-old. We would kick 20-year-old asses.
I mean, I don't know. These two nearly kicked my ass, so I'm going to be quiet with regards to that one. But going back to the Maryland points, I think that's also something interesting. Maybe that's something that Jeff Probst has under his sleeve. You know, he keeps being an advocate for like a junior survivor, not necessarily in a sense from a gameplay perspective, but rather from an adventure perspective. So maybe that's what he's gearing up. Bunch of young guys, sending them away and actually doing like this whole endurance survival thing as opposed to actually the strategic stuff of Survivor. That'd be also an interesting take.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, for sure. I just wanted to say earlier, like we were talking about the teenagers. I like, yeah, I don't know about like, I think it makes more sense that they'd be, you know, holding, you know, like casting them early and then like holding them until they're 18 as opposed to just putting them on with like 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds. That doesn't make sense. But I would love to see like a teenagers only season. I think that'd be really cool. We could see Joey just dominate. And, so I would love to see that.
Yeah, no, I think that's one player I regret not being on the same tribe with. Joey was a madman.
Oh, Claudio, I just want to come in from a different angle. I think we've mixed up the wooden spoon and the Stormy's brewing section heavily. Can we just close the wooden spoon argument?
All right. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. Everyone's going to say their name. Okay, you guys ready?
Yes.
I'm deciding. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Sarah.
Sarah.
Oh, sorry, I beat you guys. Okay, all for Sarah, put your hand up. Yeah, and Scott, who did you guys say?
I said
I'm
Michelle.
going-
Michelle, Abby?
Natalie.
Natalie, okay. I think, Scott, you and I take this one.
There we go.
All right, so I'm going to make the noise that goes quack, 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 and then, Scott, you're going to call it out. To get 3, 2, 1. Quack, quack, quack.
Sarah, sadly, you have been awarded the wooden spoon for this episode.
Overall, if we got to rank this season, where do you guys rank this season?
I would have to say, going last episode, the one before this one, the 2-hour one, I was actually like incredibly down at, like when I saw that season, I was like, wow, this season just got horrible. Like before that, it was great. But the last week, like, I was like, what is that? And then I watched the finale and I'm like, this is like the best show of all time. It was really like a crazy dichotomy. So I would have to say, I don't know. It's tough. I would have to put it number one. I have to. Listen, I saw Heroes vs. Villains when I was like, I don't know, how old was I? Like 11 or 12. So I don't remember it that well. So maybe, you know, if I rewatch it, I'd have a different opinion. But for me, this has to be the best of all time. I mean, Micronesia is great. You know, Amazon's low-key a good one. You know, Token Teens is always great. Pearl Islands, but this has got to be number one. Like, yeah.
Scott, and for you?
Yeah. So for me, I haven't seen the stretch from seasons 11 to, I want to say 24. So I'm missing like Micronesia, Heroes vs. Villains. So I'm not going to even think of those. But for me, it's definitely top 3 of what I've seen. And my top 3 would be Kagayan, Pearl Islands, and then Winners of War. I'd probably put Winners of War 2 after Kagayan. So ironically, the 2 Tony games are the 2 top seasons for me. And then Pearl Islands being 3rd place there.
So, Scott, are you saying you're a Tony subject? You're bowing down and hating the king then?
He's still not my favorite player, but he's probably my favorite winner.
Okay, that's a fair point. Corvus, and you, what do you think? What did you think overall about this season? And also, guys, I want you guys to take into consideration, we had Edge of Extinction once before. This was another example of Edge of Extinction and how complicated things can get when you have something like that. And then they still threw in fire tokens. So despite all of that, we've got Avi who's saying he's putting this as number 1. because of we've got the nostalgia in terms of all the heroes. We've got that extra competitive element because these guys are all winners. But how did it play out from a perspective of all these extra things being added? We saw the 50-50 coin for the first time. So did you guys think that all works? Does some of that continue? Do we see the edge of extinction ever again? Is the survivor economy going to become a thing? What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, you actually make a great point. Now that I think about it, I didn't really like go through all the seasons. I don't know. I might have to put Cambodia and David versus Goliath above it.
You guys see why I couldn't work with Avi. Avi just keeps changing his mind.
I'm not hearing any names. I'm just not hearing any names. No, no one's gonna get that. Anyway, no, I still think it's one of the best seasons of all time. But you're right. No, like I found myself, and I consider myself a super fan. I was telling Scott this. I found myself scratching my head at what are these, like there's extortion and the coin and this advantage and that advantage, and it's just too much. And I personally, I think it stagnates the gameplay and like an Edge of Extinction, I'm not a huge fan of, and the fire making. So yeah, once you brought that up, I think it definitely drags it down a little bit. Yeah.
I think it was either Dalton Ross or someone on the RHAP podcast that said this season people were reacting to advantages instead of reacting to people. So like before you would have people reacting to moves that people made or things that people said or did. And now instead they're reacting to the advantages coming to the game. So the strategy comes from the advantages, not necessarily the social game.
Yeah, and that's a valid point because, I mean, the whole game is centered around the social side of things. And I suppose that's what made Tony so successful with regards to this is he upped his social ability to like 20%, but he was making every move based on the possibility of an advantage or disadvantage. So that's, I suppose, what gave him the edge of everyone else. Whereas, again, if you're looking like Michelle, she got left behind because she was a social player, reading people's behaviors, actions. And once that thing was given to her, she then reacted. Whereas Tony was thinking about these moves before it even came his way, and which is why he was on the pulse so much. So it's actually a valid point. Kobus, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to respond to your question with regards to where this season sits for me in, where it ranks. And I think I do have a couple of favorites. And my favorites is it's biased, Claudio. But the thing is,
whose opinion isn't though? Let's be honest.
Any case, this is actually a whole show about bias. Anyway, about opinion. Any case, I would say I really like David versus Goliath. I really liked Millennials versus Gen X. I really liked, I was a big fan of season 38 because I liked Rick Devens so much. So it's, for me, I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best season that I've seen so far, but there were some spectacular episodes, which, I thought to myself when we started watching this, when we started covering this, shortly after we saw Sandra getting voted off with Denise's move, and that was big. And I thought to myself, how are the following episodes going to top this? And there were quite a number of episodes which were topping the previous episodes. So that for me makes it a top-notch season. And as it is a season with, all winners, who doesn't want to see that? So, I mean, it has to go down in the history books of one of the seasons which you have to see if you want to consider yourself a Survivor super fan. So if that answers your question, not my number one, but definitely in the top three, I would say.
Yeah, I do agree with. I think the reason the season works is because you've got all the winners, which makes everyone more lenient as to how things went out. I think if you had a bunch of no-named play or castaways, I think the scrutiny becomes a lot higher with regards to how they went about their approach. They made it work. In the end, they made it work. I think it was enjoyable. It was really entertaining. I took it one step at a time. I didn't get too overly excited because they introduced the Edge. I did think the Edge was a bit of a mind stuff. I would have loved to see all these guys going at each other traditionally. I wouldn't say old school because I feel like that's not a fair term, but just from a, like you mentioned, Scott, like a proper strategic battle from a social perspective. And also, you know, what's interesting, and this comes from my mom's perspective, so we can argue she's quite an old school player, or lady rather. But she mentioned, she said, you know, before in the past when we used to watch Survivor, there's a lot of emphasis on the survival point, you know, the conditions and because there's so many things that happen, we lose that completely now. It's all about all the fireworks as opposed to, you know, the celebration of what the actual thing is. And I don't know if it's maybe we just reel it in a little bit and go back to the situation of a David versus Goliath, or just a normal season. Like what did they do next? That's what I'm trying to get from you guys. What do you think they should do next?
No, well, I just want to say on your point about like how it's all about fireworks now, like you can even tell, think about the music that they play, you know, when someone's voted out. In the beginning, it was like a very like somber, like, you know, like it was very like, you know, sad, like this person's been voted off, like it's a sad thing. Now it's like this exciting, you know, like event, like this, you know, this huge celebration. So I think that, you know, I think
Sorry,
that,
I'm thinking of like a Mayan tribe celebrating a sacrifice. Like, yeah, guys, come on. Sorry. Yeah, continue.
it is, yeah. But no, I think that's a great point. Yeah, like, I mean, we talk about the best moments of last episode, like it wasn't when Natalie played the idol. It wasn't when someone found an advantage. It was the real moments. It was the thing with Sarah and Ben. It was the, you know, Sarah and Tony after the fire making. It's the raw, you know, human emotional moments. Maybe I'm alone here, but that's, you know, what really, you know, that's what I really like about Survivor, along with the strategy. But I think, you know, it's the real human, like, you know, true moments that is what gets me in. So, you know, when Jeff said we're doing something fun for 41, I'm just like, come on, Jeff, like, just give us a normal season. Like, I'm tired of all these, you know, advantages. Just do a regular season. It's Survivor. It's already the concept of Survivor is already a twist that you have to vote people off and get them to hand you $1 million. That's a twist of itself. You don't need more twists. Like, I don't know. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I would be a fan of a classic. Seeing not call it an old school season, call it a classic.
That's worse, dude. It makes it sound prehistoric. It's like I can just picture Ross from Friends digging up dinosaurs in the background. Who voted off who? No, I found some T-Rex bone over here.
Yes.
Scott, what do you think?
Claudio, you are hard to please, man. I don't know.
Damn straight. I'm worse than Boston Rob. But yeah, Scott, tell me, what are your thoughts here?
I think it always comes down to the cast. You can have a ton of advantages and still have a great season with a great cast. Like, look at David versus Goliath. That's a lot of people have that as a top 5 season, and that season introduced the nullifier. There were a bunch of idols played that season. So as long as they get the cast right and don't come up with some like new radical twist, I think they'll be good. I think you want a couple. I think I would want, honestly, 3 or 4 all newbie seasons before coming back to another returnee season after Winners at War. So I think if they get a few really good newbie seasons that can really like beef up that pool for potential returnees too, just as long as they get the cast right, I think they'll be good.
Cool, I agree with that, man. That's also one thing I was pretty sad about season 39, the Island of the Idols, is that I feel like the cast is, apart from one person in particular, I feel like the cast was pretty strong. I just think the gimmick of having mentors completely detracted from what could have been one of the like greater seasons because of how strong the cast was. So I actually feel like they let the people down there with your Jamals and everyone else out there. I don't know. Yeah, but moving along, guys. I want to let everyone know that in this off season, if you guys have not watched Survivor South Africa yet, talking about classics, old school purity, as to no fire making challenges, which is something LaRue Buerta said on our show a couple of weeks ago. He refuses, as long as he's in charge of making the series, there will be no fire making challenges. So if anyone wants to go out and you don't have anything else to do, I suggest watching season 6, because that is going down in folklore history. And if you haven't watched season 6, season 7 is cool, but I do think season 6 is like, you can even watch in reverse because of how good season 6 is.
Claudio, I must say, I'm liking what you, sorry, Avi, I just wanted to say that I'm liking what Claudio says, and I'm glad he's convinced with regards to my point of seeing a classic season.
Damn lawyer. Sorry, Avi, what are you saying?
No, that thing the thing you said about the fire making, like I already like that guy, and like I barely even know him. Like the fact that he said that, like wow, like yeah, that's great. I don't know if we're pressed for time here, but I just had like one more thing I wanted to say about the season. Is that cool? Like
Yeah, keep going, man.
I feel like we haven't talked a lot about Tony, which is ironic because he's the winner. But I just wanted to say this one thing that I saw, which really like stood out to me, just that was emblematic of his game. I saw this. It was like this quote from an interview where he was talking about his strategy going in. He was talking about always just keeping my shoulders hunched down, like like having like sitting down so people are looking down at me, like trying to prop people up and like put myself down. And, even at final tribal council, if you rewatch, he's like his shoulders are shrugged in, and just like these little like body language things, like this little like social cues that he did to make people feel like comfortable and make them feel like like that he was that he wasn't like above them, that that he was like below them, or like he was humble. And like I think that just shows like the brilliance of Tony, like that's something so subtle as that I mean, I think he's I mean, I don't think this is a very wild opinion, but he's the best player ever, and I don't really see an argument for anyone else. So yeah, I just wanted to shout out to Tony. If you're watching.
Scott, do you share that opinion, Scott?
The Tony tribute. Obvious Tony tribute.
That he's the best player of all time. I mean, I think it's hard to make an argument against him. He's 2 for 3, which of the multiple winners, that's the best percentage. And yeah, he had probably 2 of the most dominant games of all time. So I think it's tough to make an argument for anyone else. The only other person you can maybe argue for is one of these one-time winners that hasn't come back, like an Earl or a Todd. You could maybe argue for them, but again, I haven't seen their seasons yet, so I'm arguing for people I haven't seen play.
I think, to Avi's point with regards to how he carries himself. I mean, when I'm watching it, not only am I entertained, and that's the best part, is when he's playing the game, he's playing it to win it, but at the same time, he's playing from a perspective where he knows there's an audience. He's a gladiator in that sense. He's a survivor gladiator because he knows he's got to entertain. And I think the moment you throw that into the mix, it becomes a lot harder. It becomes harder in terms of making a certain move, knowing you're putting yourself at risk, despite the fact that you're doing it for entertainment. I mean, could you imagine him winning and he knows at the end, or most of them know, you winning at the end and the audience going, nah. It's the repercussion of having to deal with that, the criticism and the Reddit community saying, no, we don't like that. So from that perspective, I mean, it elevates his game so much more and his social ability. And I think we already know he had the strategic side under wraps, but then he adds gimmicks to a show that no one ever thought of. We got Jeff Probst trying to add gimmicks and trying to make it inventive, but we've got him actually making it happen through the spider nest, the spy bunk, and all that other stuff. I mean, who even goes onto that show thinking about that because of the risk that's involved when you're doing it? It's nuts.
but now we're back at the Golden Spear, right?
No, but it's fair. It's fair. This isn't Golden Spear. This is Tony Tribute. Tony Tribute section coined by Avi.
Guys, I think that's a very valid point. All the Tony tributes. Scott, Avi, thanks so much for joining us for this final episode of TNO here in my garage and Claudio's studio.
Yeah. Corbus, is that final episode forever? Are we canning this thing after this?
Let's see how it goes.
I don't know.
Check off his face, man. It's a huge honor having the 2 guys on. This episode is so good. We're just finishing it. It's the high. It's winners at war. It's not going to get better than this.
100%. So, yeah. Any closing remarks from your side, Claudio?
Avi's got something he wants to tell us.
No, I think it's just time. The tribe has spoken. It's time to give it a shot. I gotta stuff my torch, The tribe has spoken.
Oh,
on the podcast.
Don't burn yourself there.
Yeah, that's a dangerous move to stick your hand in the fire, Avi.
It's done.
Yeah, thanks guys for joining us. Really appreciate it. We got Avi who's from Chicago again, and Scotty's from Pennsylvania. Guys, before we go, you want to tell everyone where they can find you or what you guys are up to next?
Maybe you'll find me out in the woods somewhere.
That's the spirit, Scotty.
Instagram, Snapchat, if you want to follow me, it's adob26. Yeah, why not? Might as well plug it.
Yeah, and just so you guys know that the reason Scott is going to be in the woods is because he really likes plants. I mean, he's on a job hunt, guys. If anyone wants to give him a job, you want to elaborate on what that job hunt is, Scotty?
Just looking for something field biology, looking to be working outside, working with my hands, and just doing some sort of field research.
So Scotty does know people. Give him a call and give him a hire. And then we've got Avi, Mr. Avi, who is a stand-up comedian in spare time. So again, follow him because he's going to have some jokes. That's what he does. I mean, I don't know how funny you found him this episode, but...
If anyone who made it this far, they probably found me funny. So
It's true.
I do like all your commentary. I'm not going to lie. Curvis?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a special episode with you two on, and yeah, it was also special because it's our final episode, but not forever for Winners at War. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we will see each other on another episode of DNO in future, and yeah, I think it would only be appropriate if we greet each other, you know, the classic the classic Tony way.
And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, it is a wrap. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. We've got Scotty. He is a subscriber, which is why he made it onto the show. Avi, I actually don't know how he made it on. He still needs to do that. Kurbis, he subscribed to our channel because we needed a follower at the time. So please don't forget to do that. And thanks again for watching, guys. Peace.
Cheers.